Lack of medical supplies slow down Myanmar earthquake response efforts. Hamas agrees to new Gaza ceasefire proposal. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching World Today with me, Olivia Nicholas. A severe lack of medical supplies is hampering efforts to respond to the deadly earthquake in Myanmar. The United Nations said those affected needed urgent humanitarian aid. The UN said it was mobilizing emergency response efforts alongside humanitarian partner organizations following the huge earthquake that struck on Friday, leaving more than 1,600 people dead in Myanmar and neighboring Thailand. The UN humanitarian agency, OCHA, said as the full scale of the disaster unfolds, urgent humanitarian assistance is needed to support those affected. It said the response was being hindered by a lack of medical supplies, along with damaged roads and communications infrastructure. The agency noted that thousands of people are spending the night on the streets or open spaces due to the damage and destruction to homes or due to fear of further quakes. In central and northwestern Myanmar, hospitals are struggling to cope with the influx of people injured. In the southern part of Shan State, multiple townships have been affected with clothing, blankets, emergency shelters and food assistance needed immediately. The UN agency said coordination efforts were underway to conduct rapid needs assessments and scale up the emergency response. Meanwhile, anti-coup fighters in Myanmar has declared a 2-week partial ceasefire as the military began to facilitate rescue operations and other relief work after the massive earthquake hit the war-torn country. The Shadow National Unity Government said the Two People's Defence Force will implement the 2-week pause in offensive military operations except for defensive actions in earthquake-affected areas starting today. The government in exile said it would collaborate with the United Nations and non-governmental organizations to ensure security, transportation and the establishment of temporary rescue and medical camps in areas that in control. Myanmar's military has been fighting a civil war on multiple fronts since it ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government in February 2021. It is opposed by both the People's Defence Force and ethnic armed organisation, many of which have been fighting for decades. The National Unity Government consists mostly of lawmakers ousted in the coup who are working to topple the junta. On a related note, the United Kingdom has pledged £10 million in humanitarian aid for Myanmar after the earthquake caused widespread damage in the war-torn country. The UK Foreign Office explained in a statement that the UK funding will increase support in the hardest hit areas of the earthquake and geared towards food and water supplies, medicine as well as shelter. Development Minister Jennifer Chapman further revealed that UK-funded local partners are already mobilising a humanitarian response on the ground. The isolated country's ruling junta made a rare plea for international aid after the 7.7 magnitude quake struck central Myanmar. The UK has previously imposed sanctions on individuals and entities with links to the junta. A top Hamas official has revealed that the group approved a new Gaza ceasefire proposal put forth by mediators, urging Israel to back it up, but warning the Iran-backed group's weapons were a red line. Khalil al-Hayya said Hamas received a proposal from the mediators in Egypt and Qatar, adding that the group accepted it and dealt with it positively. Hayya, who leads the Hamas negotiating team in indirect talks aimed at securing a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, expressed hope that the Israeli occupation will not undermine the proposal. In response to calls on Hamas to disarm by Israel and the United States, Hayya said the group's arsenal was a red line and it would not disarm as long as the Israeli occupation and aggression exist. Security sources said Egypt had received positive indications from Israel over the new ceasefire proposal that would include a transitional phase. They noted that the proposal suggests Hamas release 5 of the Israeli hostages it is holding each week. Israel's leader Benjamin Netanyahu's office said it held a series of consultations according to the proposal that was received from the mediators, and Israel had conveyed to the mediators a counter-proposal in full coordination with the United States. The Palestine Red Crescent Society is gravely concerned about the fate of 9 crew members in the Gaza Strip, which remains unknown nearly a week after Israeli forces had hit ambulances. The Israeli military said troops had opened fire on ambulance after identifying them as suspicious vehicles in an incident last Sunday in southern Gaza that Hamas authorities condemned as a war crime, reporting at least 1 person killed. The gunfire in Rafah city's Tal al-Sultan neighborhood came just days into a renewed Israeli offensive in the southern area close to the Egyptian border after the military resumed its bombardments of Gaza on the 18th of March following an almost 2-month-long truce. The Red Crescent accused Israeli authorities of refusing to allow search operations to locate the missing workers. It said the fate of 9 crew members remains unknown after they were besieged and targeted by Israeli forces in Rafah. The organization condemned Israel's deliberate obstruction of search efforts and holds it fully responsible for the lives of its team members. The Emergency Response Service noted that initial reports from the crew at the time of the incident confirmed they came under heavy gunfire from Israeli forces, resulting in multiple injuries. A Russian drone attack killed at least 4 people and wounded 21 others in the eastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro, damaging high-rise buildings and triggering fires in a hotel service station and homes. Both Russia and Ukraine have stepped up their aerial attacks, even as U.S. President Donald Trump pushes the Kremlin and Kyiv to agree to a ceasefire after more than 3 years of costly fighting. Governor of Dnipropetrovsk region Sergei Lysak said the massive attack on Dnipro caused large-scale destruction and fires. He noted that a hotel and restaurant complex, 11 private houses, garages and a service station were on fire. Russia and Ukraine have also accused each other of breaching commitments to not strike energy facilities, throwing yet more jeopardy on the prospects of even a temporary and partial halt in the 3-year war. Since returning to office in January, Trump has pushed for a ceasefire, with navigation on the Black Sea forming an early part of negotiations. But the United States rights chief said that, in parallel with these talks, fighting in Ukraine has intensified and is killing and injuring even more civilians. Coming up next, Syrian interim president announces new transitional government.
Hai, bersama-sama kami Awatar AI Berita RTM, saya Aaron Lim.
Dan saya Cik Rita. Musim perayaan ini kami ada sedikit pesanan.
Sebelum keluar dari rumah, pastikan pintu dan tingkap dikunci. Jangan lupa tutup suis dan paip air juga.
Periksa kenderaan dulu sebelum memulakan perjalanan.
Rancang perjalanan dan sentiasa berhati-hati ketika memandu. Pakai tali pinggang keledar dan elakkan penggunaan telefon bimbit.
Kalau rasa penat atau mengantuk, rehat sekejap di R&R yang disediakan. Atau berhenti di tempat yang selamat.
Pantau juga anak-anak kecil ketika berhari raya. Adik-adik, jangan main mercun. Bahaya.
Hari raya memanglah makanan sedap-sedap. Tapi makan kena beringat juga. Kurangkan makanan berlemak dan bergula.
Akhir sekali, pada hari raya ini, hargai setiap detik bersama yang tersayang.
Pesanan ikhlas daripada kami di RTM, teman setia anda. Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. Maaf zahir dan batin. Syukuri Syawal.
Syukuri Syawal.
Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara has announced a new transitional government dominated by close allies and including one woman, replacing caretaker authorities in place since the ouster of longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad. The announcement comes amid international calls for an inclusive Syrian transition following recent sectarian bloodshed as the country's new leaders seek to reunite and rebuild Syria and its institutions after Assad's December overthrow brought an end to 14 years of civil war. Close associates of Shara held on to key positions with Foreign Minister Asad al-Shaibani and Defense Minister Murhaf Abu Kashra retaining their cabinet post. Meanwhile, Anas Khattab, the head of General Intelligence, was appointed Interior Minister. Veteran opposition figure Hind Kabawat, a member of Syria's Christian minority, was named Social Affairs and Labour Minister, the first woman to be appointed by Shara. The leader of the White Helmets, Raid al-Saleh, was appointed Minister of Emergency Situations and Disasters. In December, a caretaker government headed by Mohammed al-Bashir was appointed to steer the country until a new cabinet was formed, an announcement initially scheduled for the 1st of March. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has called for a reasoned approach to an escalating tariff war between the EU and the United States and repeated the importance of transatlantic unity. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on his country's allies and adversaries, including a 25% levy on auto imports starting next week and a 200% tariff on champagne, wine and other alcoholic drinks from the EU. The duties come amid tensions over defense, with Trump's overtures to Russia over the Ukraine war sparking concern among EU leaders about Washington's commitment to the continent's security. Meloni said she felt it was her responsibility to defend transatlantic unity and to rebuild it if necessary. She said there are differences on the table on tariffs, but precisely for this reason, the EU should not act on impulse but in a reasoned way. Meloni, however, backed plans to boost Europe's defense in the face of Washington's shift, at least in principle, while ruling out sending troops to enforce a possible peace settlement in Ukraine. Just over 10% of Italian exports go to the United States, half of them machinery and related components. France's Trade Ministry condemned United States interference on Saturday after the American embassy in Paris sent several French firms letters warning against using the diversity programs known as DEI, a frequent Donald Trump target. The letters sent to French companies currently doing or looking to do business with the United States included and attached a questionnaire asking firms to certify that they do not practice programs to promote diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI. The questionnaire added that such programs infringe on applicable federal anti-discrimination laws in the United States, where Trump signed an order banning federal DEI programs the day he returned to office for his second term. The letter published by newspaper Le Figaro told companies that Trump's 20th of January executive order against DEI programs also applies to all contractors and suppliers of the U.S. government regardless of nationality or country of operations. Economy Minister Eric Lombard's office said the letter reflects the values of the new U.S. government and insists they are not French values. The minister also said he will remind his U.S. counterparts of that. Waving flags and chanting slogans, hundreds of thousands of anti-government demonstrators rallied in Istanbul in defense of democracy after the arrest of Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, which sparked Turkey's worst street unrest in over a decade. Under a cloudless blue sky, vast crowds gathered in Maltepe on the Asian side of Turkey's biggest city. Speaking at the rally, CHP leader Özgür Özel said millions of Turks were seeking İmamoğlu's release and an election. He said the charges against the mayor were baseless and politically motivated. The mass protests, which began with İmamoğlu's 19th of March detention on contested fraud and terror charges, have prompted a repressive government response that has been sharply condemned by rights groups. Imamoglu was resoundingly re-elected mayor for the third time last year. Widely seen as the only politician capable of challenging President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the ballot box, Imamoglu was elected as CHP's candidate for the 2028 race on the day he was jailed. The anger over his arrest, which began in Istanbul, quickly spread across Turkey. Protests have been mostly peaceful, but nearly 2,000 people have been detained. In our sports segment, Gyori's take to the streets in League Cup Trophy Parade. We begin with updates on football La Liga. Real Madrid's Kylian Mbappe struck twice to help his side come from behind to claim a hard-fought 3-2 home win over relegation-threatened Leganés on Saturday. Real are level with 63 points from 29 matches, along with league leaders Barcelona, who host Girona later today. Third place Atletico Madrid dropped points in a 1-1 draw at Espanyol earlier and are now 6 points off the pace with 57. The host made a dominant start and opened the scoring after 32 minutes when Mbappe coolly chipped in a penalty awarded after Oscar Rodriguez brought down Arda Güler. However, Leganés responded almost immediately as Diego Garcia tapped in a loose ball at the far post to equalize in the following minute before Rodriguez set up Dani Raba to slot past goalkeeper Andriy Lunin in the 41st. Real midfielder Jude Bellingham brought the scores level 2 minutes after the break, sliding the ball into the net after a rebound off the crossbar. Mbappe then bagged the winner with a brilliant curled free kick in the 76th minute for his second. Leganés pushed for an equalizer but fell to a third consecutive defeat to sit 18th on 27 points, level with Alaves, who are one place higher in the safety zone on goal difference. Still on football, Newcastle was a sea of black and white on Saturday as 150,000 fans lined the city street to celebrate the Magpies League Cup success with an open-top bus parade. A 2-1 victory over Liverpool on the 16th of March saw Newcastle win their first major trophy since 1969 and first domestic cup for 70 years. The parade began at St. James Park before travelling through the city centre and ending at Town Moor, where the players and major figures from Newcastle's past were welcomed on stage. Local hero and Burn star striker Alexander Isak scored the goals at Wembley that will forever live in Newcastle folklore. Burn followed up the final by making his England debut less than a week later, aged 32, and said these scenes brought to life what ending the long wait for silverware meant on Tyneside. The festivities were rounded off by a drone show put on by club sponsor Sela, a Saudi entertainment and hospitality company. Newcastle's fortunes on the field have been revived since the takeover by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund in 2021. The Magpies reached the Champions League last season for the first time in 20 years. On to tennis. Top-ranked Aryna Sabalenka overwhelmed American Jessica Pegula 7-5, 6-2 to win the Miami Open on Saturday, relying on her usual playbook and powerful forehand to win an 8th WTA 1000 title. Sabalenka, who was runner-up in an Indian Wells earlier this month and at January's Australian Open, refused to accept the consolation trophy this time as she closed it out with a superb backhand shot down the line and thrust her hand in the air. Fourth seed Pegula has been hungry for revenge since losing to Sabalenka in her maiden Grand Slam final in New York last year, but the 31-year-old could not match the Belarusian raw power as she lost momentum after a promising start. The rivals traded breaks 3 times in the first set before Sabalenka clinched the critical break with inspired play in the final game, sending a 90-mile-per-hour winner down the line before forcing Pegula into a forehand error on set point. The American was at her best when she forced the 26-year-old Belarusian to sprint back and forth on the baseline in the opening game of the second set and broke with a backhand winner. But Sabalenka quickly subdued Pegula with her power leveling it in the second game. Sabalenka converted yet another break to clinch the match.
In motorsports, Ducati's Marc Marquez maintained his perfect start to the 2025 MotoGP season when the Polisitter won the America's Grand Prix sprint on Saturday to remain undefeated and extend his lead in the championship. Marquez had become the first rider to claim 8 poles at the single circuit when he set the faster time in qualifying earlier on Saturday and a 5th win in 5 sprint and races this season moved Marquez to 86 points.
Marquez's brother and closest competitor, Alex of Gresini Racing, finished second, once again less than a second behind, to move up to 67 points, while factory Ducati teammate Francesco Bagnaia completed the podium. Despite starting on the second row, it was Bagnaia who stormed off the line from 6 to take the lead into turn 1 and then again on turn 3 before Marc took the place back as the 2 Ducati teammates aggressively battled for position. Marc nearly lost control of his bike on lap 1, allowing Alex and Bagnaia to overtake him. But the Polisitter was in no mood to finish third, immediately regaining the lead with a daring overtake to set the tone for the sprint. Once Marc had clear air in front of him at the circuit of the Americas, he peeled away with Alex in tow as the 2 brothers put some distance between themselves and Bagnaia in third.
In cycling, United States rider Quinn Simmons edged Pavel Bittner to take the 6th stage of the Tour of Catalonia on Saturday as dangerous winds played havoc on the planned route. Home favourite Juan Ayuso retained his 1-second lead on Primož Roglič at the top of the general classification, with Enrique Mas a further 20 seconds back in the third.
Stage 6 was supposed to be the toughest mountain stage of the race, but the conditions led organisers to modify the route significantly, with only 25 kilometres of racing permitted. What was supposed to be a 159-kilometre ride from Berga to a summit finish at Queralt turned into a largely flat loop starting and ending in Berga. Wisma's Matthew Brennan, who has won 2 stages this week, pulled out before the start. The race began neutralised because of the dangerous winds and stayed that way until the final 25 kilometres. General classification times were taken with 5 kilometres remaining, with UAE Team Emirates XRG's Ayuso maintaining his slim advantage on the 2023 winner Roglič. The winner finishes Sunday in Barcelona with an 88.2 kilometre ride up to the Olympic Stadium on the city's Montjuic Hill.
Cyclists take on twists and turns around go-kart track in Zelenograd. That and more up next in our Offbeat segment.
Dozens of Russian cycling enthusiasts raced on a go-karting track in the town of Zelenograd in the Moscow region. The race, organized by a local cycling club, was made up of several laps around a go-karting circuit full of sharp and awkward turns. It was a track not fit for cycling, but that seemed to be one of the main draws for many of the men and women having a go on 2 wheels. On top of the challenge of burning bicycle rubber on a go-karting track, the vast majority of the participants chose to do laps on fixed-gear bicycles without brakes. Despite being billed as race, many of the participants saw the event more as a chance to meet like-minded enthusiasts and made up for the cycling time lost during the long Russian winter that shortens the cycling season in Moscow. Race organizer Ilya Molotov, who also owns a small company that makes clothing for cyclists, said cycling in the Russian capital and the wider Moscow region is becoming more popular every year, and there is no need to step up to a professional level to enjoy the thrill of a friendly contest. The waters of Senegal's Lake Redbar are back to their famous pink hues 3 years after floods washed away their rosy tinge, and business folk and tourists are thrilled. Widely known as the Pink Lake, Redbar is a magnet for tourists lying 40 kilometers northeast of the capital Dhaka. Separated from the Atlantic by a narrow dune, the shallow lake is so densely laden with salt that bathers float like corks. Harvesting and selling the salt from its waters is a lucrative sideline. But in late 2022, unusual and heavy flooding hit the region, likely aggravated by climate change, scientists said at the time, and disturbed the ecological balance of the lake. Afterwards, the water lost its pinkish color, proving a hammer blow to salt producers, traders, hotel owners, and other commercial activities linked to the legendary Pink Lake. As the conditions are becoming right again, there is a high concentration of salt in the lake coming from seawater. In contact with the sun, the salt concentration produces a large amount of evaporation, conducive to the proliferation of microorganisms, particularly those called pink algae. The National Ecological Monitoring Committee said cyanobacteria produce the pink when it's red pigment diluted in the water. Visitors will be able to step back over 3,000 years into the land of pharaohs as they enter London's new immersive exhibition on ancient Egypt. Tutankhamun, the immersive exhibition, features one of Europe's largest immersive video mapping rooms with 8-meter-high projections and takes visitors on a virtual journey through ancient Egypt while recounting its rich history. The exhibition features a seated 360-degree virtual reality experience plus an interactive digital metaverse walkthrough of the Valley of the Kings, exploring British archaeologist Howard Carter's space camp and reliving the historical moment of his 1922 discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, one of ancient Egypt's most legendary rulers. The exhibition, co-created with Egyptologists and historians, features mystical tombs, golden treasures, the life story of Tutankhamun, as well as his tomb. It also displays original artifacts from Egyptologists' private collections, including those owned by Carter. Following runs in 12 cities around the world, as well as winning 3 Telly Awards to date, the immersive event will run until the 29th of June. A free public exhibition of large decorated egg sculptures was launched in London in a bid to raise awareness about Asian wildlife conservation. The Big Egg Hunt features more than 100 eggs scattered around the British capital and was initiated by charity Elephant Family with Clarence Court Eggs. Names from the world of art, design, fashion and food have each designed an egg, including the likes of artists Philip Colbert, Sophie T, Boyard Messenger and Dominic Harris. The sculptures are on show until the 27th of April, after which they will be auctioned to raise funds for Elephant Family, which focuses on wildlife conservation in Asia.
What we want the Big Egg Hunt to do is raise awareness of the importance of conservation, particularly across South Asia, which is home to some of the most incredible species of animals, including, of course, the Asian elephant, but also tigers, pangolins, and just an extraordinary biodiversity of creatures.
That wraps up World Today this time around. In our top story, lack of medical supplies slow down Myanmar earthquake response efforts. I'm Olivia Nicholas, Malaysia Madani from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day, Malaysia.